All right, so this is 5-6 solving polynomial equations by factoring. So earlier on, I told you it's very important to get those exponents down as close to zero as possible because it would pay off later in the long run. Okay, so why is that? Well, the other day I was talking about mainly I don't know, like a week ago, I was talking to you guys about when you factor an equation, you're able to determine a lot about it. And the main thing was the x-intercepts, okay? So the first thing we need to do is go over prior knowledge. We know how to solve x minus 1 equals 0. First step, add 1, okay? We get x equals 1. That was easy enough. And then let's solve x plus 2 equals 0. So we subtract 2, and we get x equals negative 2. Now, why do I need to know this? Why am I bringing this up now? Well, there's a little fun fact in algebra, and you can write this down if you want, but it's pretty much a times b equals 0, okay? And if a times b equals 0, well, then this says that either a equals 0 or b equals 0. Now, how does that play a role into this? Well, if I have a quadratic or a cubic or something like that, and I'm trying to solve it, meaning I'm trying to find the roots, the zeros, the x-intercepts, all of these things mean the same thing. It's all talking about, I want to find out where does it cross the x-axis, okay? Well, we know that we have these functions, okay? And it's like y equals or f of x equals, okay? And we know that the x-intercept has a y value of 0. So in order to solve them, I need to set it equal to 0, which gives us something like this. X minus 1 times the quantity of x plus 2 equals 0. Well, that's going to tell me that either x minus 1 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0. And then I solve that, and it tells me that this has an x-intercept of 1 or negative 2. Okay? And this is by the zero factor property. It was that thing I was talking about, a times b equals 0. Either a is 0 or b is 0. In this case, a is x minus 1 and b is x plus 2. All right? So we have these quadratic equations or cubics or whatever, okay? And they're written as ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. All right? So it could be written like that, or it could say like f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And I could say, what are the x-intercepts? And I'm all talking about the same thing. All right? So now what I want you guys to do is I want you to factor and solve, okay? So the first thing I want to bring up is this, okay? I can find these, and after this whole section, I will show you an easier way to do it, okay? But I'm not trying to give you guys shortcuts now. There is an easier way to find these intercepts, okay? If you figure it out, go for it, all right? And we'll go from there. All right, but this section is going to be very heavy on the work. Okay, I'm going to want to see the work associated with this. I don't want to see the shortcuts if you find it. So if you find it, more power to you to check your work. All right, but we're going to be talking about uploading work for these sections. So here, all right, we talked about factoring x squared plus x minus 6. In the last section we talked about, we're going to focus on that negative 6. We're going to talk about the factors of negative 6. All right, since it's negative, I taught you guys the tricks and how it factored, okay? But I'm going to put up all the factors here. So negative 1 and 6, 1 and negative 6, negative 2 and 3, or it was 2 and negative 3. And we were looking for the factors of 6 that added up to 1, this like middle term. Notice the coefficient is 1. So if I add these 2, I can see this is negative 1. Yeah, I know that's my answer, but I want to show you this is negative 5 and this is 5. That's not it. That's not it. Bingo, not it. So this x squared plus x minus 6 equals 0 factors to x minus 2 times x plus 3 equals 0. And then I'm going to solve each of these pieces. X minus 2 equals 0 and x plus 3 equals 0. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2. And that gives me x equals 2. Or over here, subtract 3 and I get x equals negative 3. So my two answers are x equals 2 and x equals negative 3. These are my x-intercepts. Okay? Any questions? I know I'm not physically there. I know you missed me. It is what it is. Okay? But I know we can do this. Now, let's go over C. Well, C says, well, we have no middle term. So we're looking at the factors of negative 25 that add up to 0. Well, we have negative 1 and 25. We have 1 and negative 25. We have negative 5 and 5. Which one of these add up to 0? I think it's easy to say that it's the last one. So that's not it. That's not it. Bingo. X minus 5 times x plus 4 or 5 equals 0. Now, we have x minus 5 equals 0 and x plus 5 equals 0. So we add 5 to both sides. On the left equation, we get x equals 5. And then on the right, we have minus 5 on both sides. That gives me x equals negative 5. So there are my two answers. All right. Now, B is pretty tricky, okay? And we're going to have to solve it using the British method, which is what I taught you guys. All right, we combine those. That's negative 24. And then we're going to look at the factors of negative 24 that can combine to give me 5. Okay, so we have negative 1 and 24, 1 and negative 24. We have negative 2 and 12. We have 2 and negative 12. We have negative 3 and 8. Then we have 3 and negative 8. We have negative 4 and 6, and 4 and negative 6. So it's really important to start like eliminating these things and being able to do this quickly in your head. Otherwise, I mean, 24, look at that. We have a huge list here. All right. Now, I can do this for every one, but I'm looking for 5. I know 3 and 8 are going to give me 5. These are not it. Okay. Starting to look for numbers that are going to give me 5. So this is going to be 2x squared. Now we're going to write minus 3x plus 8x minus 12. Okay. I'm going to leave that 0 aspect for a little later. I just want to focus on the factor. Now remember, we're going to factor this out by grouping. So I'm going to group the first 2 together. And then I'm going to group the second 2 together. So if I do the first 2, all right, I'm going to factor out an x. So it's going to be x times the quantity of 2x minus 3. And now I'm going to factor the back part. It's going to be plus. I'm going to factor out a 4 from that. It's going to be 2x minus 3. Notice I have the same thing. So you're going to write 2x minus 3. And I'm going to write what's left, and that's x plus 4. But remember, it was all equal to 0. So now I'm going to solve the 2x minus 3 equals 0 by adding 3. And I have 2x equals 3. And I'm going to divide by 2. So I get x equals 3 halves. X plus 4 equals 0. Subtract 4. It gives me x equals negative 4. Two answers. Okay? Now, one thing I want to note is this. It's not a coincidence that I have two answers and that exponent is 2. Whatever your largest exponent is, that's how many answers you're going to have. If it's 3, you have 3 answers. If it's 4, you have 4 answers. Okay? So you can see this can get pretty tricky. For now, we're going to stick with quadratics, 2s. Up here for D, well, I don't have 3 terms. I notice they both have x's, 9 and 15. They both share a 3. So I'm going to factor out a 3x. I'm going to do this one by greatest common factor. So factor out a 3x. 9 divided by 3 is 3. X squared divided by x is x. 15 divided by 3 is 5. X divided by x, well, they cancel. So I have 3x equals 0. Well, that gives me x equals 0 real quick. And I have 3x plus 5 equals 0. Subtract 5. Gives me 3x equals -5. And then divide by 3. X equals -5 thirds. All right. So again, these are all about the x-intercepts. Remember, zeros, solving, x-intercepts, roots, all of those answers or all of those words mean the same thing. So in order to apply the zero factor property, equations must be written in general form, meaning they must be set equal to 0. I can't factor anything like an a until it's set to 0. So what I do is I just subtract that. That's 0 on the right, so I have x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0. Now, I'm looking for the factors of -10 that are going to give me -3. Think about it. I think we can see it's going to be 2 and -5. So this factors to x plus 2 times x minus 5. So I get x equals -2 and x equals +5. And those are good ovals. Let's go to B. Well, what the heck am I going to do with B? It says s times the quantity of s plus 4 equals 96. Doesn't really help me out. So what I want to do is I kind of want to undo this. So I get s squared plus 4s equals 96. And now I'm going to subtract that 96 to set it equal to 0. So now that I have this equation, I'm going to be focusing on that 96, all right? So what are the factors of -96? That will give me 4. Well, let's see. I would start by, I don't know, let's say 16. Let's see. Does 16 go into 96? So I would do 96 divided by 16, and I got 6. Okay? So 6 and 16, that's going to be 10. It's not really helpful. So 96 divided by, I don't know. Let's say 12. Ooh, that's 8. I like 12 and 8. 12 and 8 is nice because 12 and 8 are 4 numbers apart. So we need it to be positive for us. So I'm going to do -8 and 12. Okay. Sometimes you're not going to get it on the first try, but you can always write out your factor list. Now I'm going to do s minus 8 times s plus 12. That equals 0. Let me get rid of that now that we don't need it. So I get s equals 8, and I get s equals -12. So there's that. See, when you get these x's all to one side, so I get 2x squared minus 32x equals 0. So I'm going to factor out a GCF of 2x. That's going to give me x minus 16 equals 0. So I get 2x equals 0. Well, that's easy to see. X is 0. And then on this side, I get x equals 16. Again, repetition. Got to see it. If you have questions, come to office hours. All right, we can do this. Let's look at D. I'm scrolling up because I know I'm going to need space for D. Now, with D, what I got to do is I got to get that 25 to the other side. 4x squared plus 15x minus 25 equals 0. Now I have to use the British method because my first coefficient is not 1. I can't just factor 25 and hope to get it. Negative 100. So what are the factors of negative 100? And we'll add up to 15. Well, kind of see it right out the gate. Okay, it's going to be negative 5 and 20. So 4x squared minus 5x plus 20x minus 25 equals 0. I could have flipped that around, didn't. All right, I'm going to group this together. I'm going to factor out an x from that. I'm going to get x times 4x minus 5. This, I'm going to factor out a 5. That's going to give me 4x minus 5. And this all equals 0. So that leaves me with, this is shared. This is shared. 4x minus 5 times x plus 5, because that's what's left, equals 0. So I have 4x minus 5 equals 0. Add 5. Gives me 4x equals 5. And then divided by 4, and I get x equals 5/4. Over here, I think we can all see it's going to be x equals negative 5 real quick. Now, sometimes when we do this, we get things called double roots. Okay, it's a repeated solution. All right, remember, we have to have 2 answers. I have 2 answers. It's okay for the answers to be the same, but I have to have 2 of them because that exponent's squared. So again, I'm going to subtract 6x to make sure I line everything up. So I have x squared minus 8x plus 16. I'm looking for the factors of 16 that add up to negative 8. So follows the rule of negative positive. It needs to be negative negative by a factor. So the only factors of 16 that add up to negative 8 are x minus 4 and x minus 4. So again, I have x minus 4 equals 0. And I have x minus 4 equals 0. See, I have 2 roots. I know they're going to be the same, but I'm showing you have 2 roots. To stick with the whole, I knew that at the start. So I have 2 roots. It's called a double root at 4. With B, add 25 to both sides. X squared minus 10x plus 25 equals 0. Looking for the factors of 25 that add up to negative 10. Well, it's negative 5, negative 5. So it's going to be x minus 5 times x minus 5. And we've been doing this long enough that we can see my answers are x equals 5. All right, now I told you that the exponent dictates how many answers I have. Well, now I have polynomials with an exponent of 3. So it means I have 3 answers. First step, get everything to one side. Doesn't matter what side. It just matters that your leading coefficient is positive. You don't want it to be negative. All right. So what do I mean by that? Well, my highest degree is 3. So I want to get everything to the side with the 3. I could move that to the other side, but then I'd have to kind of divide by a negative. That's more work for me. So I am going to set my right side equal to 0. My left side becomes 3x cubed. There's no like terms, so it's 3x cubed minus 15x squared minus 18x. Now, they all have x. You can factor that out. They're all divisible by 3. You can factor that out. 3x cubed divided by 3x is x squared. Negative 15 divided by 3 is negative 5. X squared divided by x is x. Negative 18 divided by 3 is negative 6. X divided by x. Well, I can't. So notice I'm starting to get different parts here. What are the factors of negative 6 that add up to negative 5? Well, I know we're all going to want to say 2 and 3 because they add up to 5. But notice one's going to have to be positive, one's going to have to be negative. So I'm not going to get that 5 I'm looking for. The one I'm actually looking for is 1 and negative 6. So that would factor to, okay, x plus 1 and x minus 6. Now I have 3 parts here. 1, 2, 3. 3x equals 0. X plus 1 equals 0, and x minus 6 equals 0. So my 3 answers are x equals 0, x equals negative 1, and x equals 6. All right, let's go straight to B. That one's easy because I didn't have to move anything. So I notice they all share an x. I'm going to pull that x out. Leaves me with x squared minus 19x plus 84. Now I'm looking for the factors of 84 that can give me 19. I see it. Okay, I don't know why I didn't see it a second ago. Now I do. All right. It follows the pattern of negative positive, which means my answer is going to have to factor to a x minus some number and x minus some number. Okay. The factors of 84 that add up to 19 are 7 and 12. Okay. And they're going to be minus, so it's x minus 7 and x minus 12. So we have x equals 0, x minus 7 equals 0, and x minus 12 equals 0. My 3 answers are x equals 0, x equals 7, and x equals 12. 2 more. Oh, D is going to be nice and easy. So they both share an x. I'm going to factor that out. So I'm left with x squared minus 4. Now, we were talking about this the other week. Okay, I notice that it's the difference of squares left. So what times what gives me 4? That's 2. So I have x times x minus 2 times x plus 2. You can check me on that. You can unfoil it if you want. So I have x equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0, and x plus 2 equals 0. So I have x equals 0 as an answer, x equals 2 as an answer, and x equals negative 2 as an answer. Now, E follows A. I need to get all that to one side, so I'm going to subtract x squared and an x on both sides. All this cancels. I'm left with 0 on the right. On the left, I'm left with x cubed minus x squared minus x. Now, I'm going to factor out 8x. So this is going to leave me with x times the quantity of 6x squared minus x minus 1. Unfortunately, I have to do the British method here. Okay, so I am going to multiply -1 and 6 to get -6. And I'm looking for the factors of -6 that will add up to give me -1. So that's going to be -3 and 2. So I'm going to have 6x squared plus, let's do plus 2x minus 3x minus 1. And I know this is all confusing, so we can just really focus on just this piece for now. So if we just focus on this piece, I can come back and deal with that x later, but it's still there. So let's group this together. So I'm going to factor out the 2x. So that gives me 2x times the quantity of 3x plus 1. And now in the back half, well, it's close to this, but those are negative. So I'm going to factor out a -1. That leaves me 3x plus 1. Well, I'm going to write this is what's shared. I'm going to write what's left. And now don't forget, there was the x outside from the beginning. So it's x times all that. Because remember, I need 3 answers. First answer, x equals 0. Second answer, when does 3x plus 1 equal 0? Well, if we solve that, we get 1 or -1/3. And then when does 2x minus 1 equal 0? Well, if I add 1 to both sides, I'm going to get 2x equals 1. So x equals 1/2. All right. What a doozy. All right, challenge. Accepted. Here we go. I have 8x to the 4th plus 12x cubed minus 32x squared minus 48x. Well, I notice they all have an x, so I'm going to factor that out. And I also notice they can all be divided by 4. Let's get that out. 8 divided by 4 is 2. X to the 4th divided by x is x cubed. 12 divided by 4 is 3. X cubed divided by x is x squared. -32 divided by 4 is -8. X squared divided by x is x. -48 divided by 4 is -12. X divided by x, well, there we go. Now, I like where this is going. Now let's look what's inside the parentheses, okay? I'm not going to worry about this. I'm just going to drop that straight down. Inside the parentheses, I have this mumbo jumbo. Let's factor by grouping. So I notice here that 2x cubed and the 3x squared, they only have an x squared in common. So I'm going to factor that out. It's going to leave me with 2x plus 3. Over here, I notice they both have a negative. So I'm going to factor that out. I'm going to factor out a 4. So that's going to leave me with 2x plus 3 inside. That's nice because notice, shared. So my 4x drops straight down. I'm going to write what's shared, which is 2x plus 3. And I'm going to write what's left, which is x squared minus 4. Well, this is nice because that first term, that green term is linear, the black term is linear. And this part back here is not too bad because that can be easily factored. So let's not deal with this. Let's not deal with this. Let's deal with this. Well, notice that's the difference of two squares. So we've seen that one before. That's x plus 2 times x minus 2. Now I have four different terms. I have 4x, the green. I have the black term, which is 2x plus 3. And I have the red terms, which I just did. So the green term, 4x equals 0. Well, that's x equals 0. Black term, 2x plus 3 equals 0. Well, if I subtract 3, that gives me 2x equals negative 3, divide by 2, and x equals negative 3 halves. In the red terms, I have x plus 2 equals 0. Well, that's x equals negative 2. And I have x minus 2 equals 0. And that's going to be x equals positive. Real world application. A rock is dropped into a well from a height of 64 feet above the water. The rock's height relative to the water surface is given by the position h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 64, where t is the time in seconds since the rock was dropped. How long does it take the rock to hit the water? Wow. This is fun. So here, let's think about it. If you have a rock and you're standing above a well and you drop it, okay, that's like the top of the quadratic or the parabola. And I am looking for where it hits the bottom when the height is 0. So I'm going to know when h of t equals 0. Well, let's just set it equal to 0. So 0 equals negative 16 t squared plus 64. Well, 16 goes into 64, so I'm going to actually factor out a negative 16 because that's going to make my first term positive. So that gives me t squared. And then 64 divided by negative 16 is negative 4. Look at that. I just did that problem. So I get negative 16 equals t plus 2 times t minus 2. Now I have two answers here. How do I know which one it is? Well, let's solve them. For the one, I have t plus 2 equals negative 2. So that's negative 2 seconds. And then I have t minus 2. That's going to give me t equals 2 seconds. Well, here's the funny thing. You can't go back in time. So my time is 2 seconds. All right. So I want you guys to, if there's any time left, work on your web assign and go from there.